In a small village in Ireland, the bookmakers still talk about the day they got beaten by a man hiding in a thorn bush. Not metaphorically, literally. On June 26, 1975, while 120 racing enthusiasts placed their bets at the Bellowstown Racecourse in County Meath, the man who had engineered the entire operation was crouched behind a hedgerow at the edge of the track, watching through binoculars, waiting to see if the most audacious legal robbery in the history of Irish horse racing was about to make him a legend or destroy him completely. His name was Barney Curley. He had no gun. He had no mask. He had broken no law that anyone could prove in any court in the country. What he had instead was something considerably more dangerous than a weapon. He had a plan, and that plan was about to extract the equivalent of $3.5 million from the Irish and British betting industry in the space of approximately 45 minutes. Welcome to World Unveiled. This is the story of the most genius legal robbery in history. To understand what Barney Curley did on that June afternoon, you need to understand how the betting system worked in 1970s Ireland. When a horse race was scheduled, bookmakers would set odds on each horse based on their perceived likelihood of winning. A fast horse with a strong record might be offered at 1-2, meaning a £1 bet returns 50 pence in profit. A slow horse with a terrible record might be offered at 20-1, meaning a £1 bet returns £20 in profit if that horse somehow wins. The odds were not fixed. They were dynamic. As bettors across the country placed their money in betting shops, those shops reported the flow of money back to the bookmakers at the track. If a lot of money started appearing on a particular horse, the bookmakers would shorten the odds immediately to limit their exposure. The communication link between the betting shops around the country and the bookmakers at the track was critical to the entire system functioning. It was also, as Barney Curley had identified, the system's single fatal weakness. Barney had grown up watching his father Charlie operate on the margins of this world. Charlie Curley trained greyhounds and bet on them using a method that was simple and effective. Before a race, he would administer drugs to his best dog to slow it down, bet against it, and watch the money roll in. Then he would dose his worst dog to speed it up, bet everything on it at maximum odds, and collect. It was fraud of the most basic kind, but in an era before serious regulation, it was difficult to prove. Barney learned everything about this world at his father's feet, including its risks. When Barney was 15, his father handed him a piece of drugged meat and told him to feed it to the racing dog. Barney fed it to a different dog instead. The intended dog ran clean and lost. The doped dog won. Barney had quietly placed his own money on the winner. His first profit from gambling was made by outsmarting his own father, and he was 15 years old. It told him everything he would ever need to know about the game. The only rule that mattered was whether the plan worked. By 1975, Barney had spent years in the gambling world accumulating both experience and debt. His reputation had grown to the point where his presence at a racecourse was itself a signal to bookmakers that something unusual was about to happen. They would shorten odds on any horse associated with him before a single pound had been placed simply because they knew his track record. He was £12,000 in debt, and the conventional routes out of that debt were closed to him precisely because he was too well known for any of them to work. It was in this position, broke and cornered and with nothing left to lose, that the plan formed. It was elegant in the way that the best plans always are, not complicated, simple. So simple that no one had ever thought to do it before, and so specific in its exploitation of a single systemic vulnerability that once it was executed, the entire betting industry would change its rules to make sure it could never happen again. He needed a horse with terrible official form, not just bad form, but catastrophically documented failure across multiple races on record. He found it through an old contact. The horse was given the name Yellow Sam, which happened to be his father's nickname, a detail that contained either sentiment or irony depending on how well you knew Barney Curley. Yellow Sam's record before Barney acquired him was genuinely dismal. In 9 races, he had finished worse than 8th. What nobody outside Barney's circle knew was that the horse had been run deliberately in conditions that did not suit him, soft ground when he preferred firm, distances that were wrong for his stride, against horses in categories where he was structurally disadvantaged. His official handicap rating had been pushed to the lowest possible level through a sustained campaign of strategic underperformance. In reality, Yellow Sam was a strong, capable horse who could run fast on firm ground over the right distance. His official record bore no relationship to his actual ability. This gap between perception and reality was the foundation of everything. Barney chose Bellowstown Racecourse in County Meath for reasons that had nothing to do with the quality of the racing. Bellowstown had exactly 1 public telephone. 1. In an era before mobile phones, when the entire communication infrastructure connecting a racecourse to the national betting network ran through a single fixed line. Controlling access to that telephone meant controlling the flow of information between the track and the rest of the country. If that telephone was occupied at the critical moment, the bookmakers at Bellowstown would be isolated. They would have no way of knowing that enormous amounts of money were being placed on Yellow Sam in betting shops across Ireland and the United Kingdom. They would have no reason to shorten his odds. He would go to the start of the race at 20 to 1, and all of that money would collect at 20 to 1. The operation required 300 people. Barney spent weeks identifying them, briefing them individually, handing each one a sealed envelope containing between 50 and 300 pounds in cash and a single instruction. Wait until the final 25 minutes before the race. Then go to your nearest betting shop and place the entire contents of the envelope on Yellow Sam to win. The total investment across all 300 agents was £15,000. Everything Barney had. His entire life savings placed on a horse whose true ability only he and his closest associates knew. The man assigned to the telephone was Benny O'Hanlon, one of Barney's most trusted friends. He arrived at the phone booth 25 minutes before the race began. He lifted the receiver and dialed. He began to cry. Not quietly, loudly, publicly, with the full theatrical commitment of a man whose performance needed to be convincing for approximately 25 minutes. His aunt was dying. He told anyone who came near the booth he had to stay on the line. He could not hang up. When a bookmaker's representative pushed to the front of the growing queue and demanded the phone, O'Hanlon held firm. Barney's instruction had been specific on this point. If anyone tries to physically take the phone, break it before you let them use it. No one was going to make a call from that booth until the race had started and the odds had locked. At racecourses across Ireland and Britain, betting shop operators were watching an extraordinary thing happen on their boards. Money was appearing on Yellow Sam at a rate that made no sense given his record. They reached for their phones to call Bellowstown and report the movement so the bookmakers could adjust the odds. Every call came back busy. They tried again. Busy? They kept trying. Busy. The single telephone line at Bellowstown was occupied by a man crying about his dying aunt, and the race clock was counting down. When the starting gate opened, Yellow Sam moved through the field like a horse running a different race from the rest of the field. He cleared all 13 hurdles. He crossed the finish line 2.5 lengths ahead of the favorite. Benny O'Hanlon hung up the telephone, dried his tears, walked out of the booth, and disappeared into the crowd. When the bookmakers at Bellowstown finally reached their colleagues in the betting shops and understood what had happened, the atmosphere on the course became extremely heated. They located O'Hanlon. He told them his aunt had made a miraculous recovery. He had never heard of Barney Curley. There was nothing they could do. Nothing illegal had occurred. A man had used a public telephone for an extended period during a medical family emergency. Another man had trained a horse that was better than its official record suggested and entered it in a race it was capable of winning. 300 people had each independently decided to place a legal bet on the same horse at the same time. The bookmakers paid out in £1 notes. The total payout came in 108 bags of cash. The equivalent in today's money was $3.5 million. Barney Curley died on May 23, 2020, at the age of 81, having spent the final decades of his life donating enormous sums to charity work in Zambia. The racing world mourned him as a genius and remembered him as the Robin Hood of racing. He had found a crack in the system, widened it with patience and precision over months of planning, and walked through it in broad daylight with $3.5 million. The bookmakers changed their rules within weeks. Large bets now required a minimum 30-minute advance window, specifically to prevent what Barney had done from ever being done again. Rule change was his monument, the most permanent tribute the system could pay to a man who had beaten it completely. This is World Unveiled. Subscribe, because the most extraordinary victories are always the ones that required no weapons at all.